Alright, it's time for a remake of a beloved classic. Because, why not? Because Bob Zemeckis said so, bitch! The Witches is brought to us by director Robert Zemeckis and is a remake of the 1990 classic, The Witches. We follow a young boy played by Jazier Bruno named, Boy? I don't really know. I don't think he had a name. I don't even know if they ever really said his name. I think he had a name in the original movie, but I really can't remember. Hero Boy. His name's Hero Boy, okay? Anyway, this young boy's parents unfortunately perish in a car accident, so he is placed in the custody of his grandmother, played by the always wonderful Octavia Spencer. When Grandma gets wind of some weird goings-on in the area, she decides to take our young hero on vacation to a hotel to get away from everything because she's scared of something. We soon find what she's scared of is witches. Apparently, witches are a real thing, and apparently, witches were trying to get our young protagonist. Unfortunately for them, in a case of the absolute worst luck in the history of the world, they go to the one hotel where the witches are going to have a convention, headed up by the head big bad witch herself, Anne Hathaway. Honestly, can't remember if her witch character had a specific name either. I think they just called her the Grand Master Witch or something, which is really kind of leaning towards somewhere I don't want to go, but we're just going to call her the Head Witch. Through a course of very unfortunate events, our hero uncovers a plot by the witches to open candy stores across the country and sell children candy laced with a poison that will turn them into mice. And of course, he is caught by the witches, and he and another young boy at the hotel are turned into mice. So we spend the rest of the story with our new hero Mouse and his friend trying to survive life in the hotel, find a cure, and defeat the evil witches. The Witches is a remake of the 1990 Angelica Houston classic. Both are based on the popular children's book of the same name by Roald Dahl, and they all have basically the same story, but here they have changed some of the elements, such as this time, instead of taking place in Europe, this one takes place in the Deep South in 1960s Alabama. Now, apart from a location and time change, the story is basically the same as the 1990 movie. However, there is one main difference that I did actually like better here than the original. But we'll get to that in a minute. I think the question you always have to ask yourself when entering into a remake is, was this remake justified? And in this case, not really. This isn't a bad movie per se, but I didn't really feel like the 1990 movie needed to be remade. It was already a really fun movie with some really good effects, especially for the time. And what really made the 1990 movie stand out is that while it was a family movie, it did have quite a dark side and could be a bit traumatizing for younger audiences. It's very much in line with those 1980s live-action Disney movies. You know, back when Disney had balls and they'd actually make live-action movies that were a bit interesting. Ooh, somebody's gonna have something to say about that. However, here, a lot of that darkness has been lost. A lot of the same things happen in this movie as they did in the older one, but it's lost that edge that the original one had. Like I said, the 1990 movie was a family film, but it had an edge. It wasn't afraid to go a little bit further, and it didn't treat its audience like they were 5 years old. It understood that this story was for a little bit of an older audience. Not like super old, it wasn't like real mature or anything, but it did have some really dark themes, and there were some parts in it, especially with the actual witches, that were a bit terrifying at times. Now, this one does try to do that at times, especially with the look of the witches, but unfortunately, they do the vast majority of their design with CGI, and it stands out. So it doesn't really look scary, it just looks kind of fake. It's not terrible or anything, but when we're comparing it to that original, which we inevitably are going to, it just doesn't stand up. That old mouth thing they got going in this movie, though, that's pretty fucking freaky. I will give them that. That shit, that was pretty unsettling at times. Now, being basically the same story as the original, the story here is interesting. I did enjoy that aspect of it. However, the execution is a bit drawn out here. There's a bit of a lull about halfway through the movie where you just start to look at your watch and wonder, okay, let's get this going. Can we get to the conclusion? Come on now. And that's something you just didn't have with the original. It moved at a really brisk pace. Now, something that this one did do story-wise that I actually did like more was the ending. The ending of the 1990 movie notoriously strayed from the book's ending. However, here we get a much closer version of the book's ending than the original 1990 movie. I'm not gonna spoil it or anything, but if you're familiar with the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. And while yes, there is a bit of sadness that goes along with this original ending on the surface, if you look a little bit deeper, you'll see that there's actually a really good message there and quite a bit more meaning. Overall, I did really like the very ending of this movie better than the original, but that is almost about it. There's one other thing I did really enjoy about this movie, and that is the always amazing Octavia Spencer. Octavia Spencer's turn as the grandmother here is wonderful. But what's new? Octavia Spencer is pretty fucking amazing in everything she's in. I really wish she was like my neighbor or something. She just seems like somebody I really want to know. She brings a warmth and genuineness to her role that just permeates throughout the entire film. Every scene she's in is better because she is there. Now that's not to say that everybody else in the movie doesn't do a good job. In fact, all the performances here are really good. Jazier Bruno does a really good job as our hero. You believe in him and he's really likable, and he actually does have a range of emotions which you don't always find in child actors. And overall, I think he was a great pick for this role. Stanley Tucci shows up in a supporting role, and while he doesn't have a whole lot to do here, while he's there, he does a good job as usual. And then of course there's Anne Hathaway as the head witch. Now let's get it out of the way right now. Anne Hathaway is no Angelica Houston. That's not to say that Hathaway was bad here. She actually did give a really good performance and seemed like she was having a great time with this over-the-top role. And really, if it wasn't for Houston's performance in the 1990 movie, I probably wouldn't have a whole lot negative to say about her performance here. Not that there's anything negative about her performance, but let's be real. We're going to compare it to the 1990 version. Angelica Houston did this character already, and in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long ago, so they are going to be compared. And when it comes to this character, Angelica Houston just wins hand over fist. That's not to say that Hathaway didn't do a good job and give it her all, because she did. As I said, she seems like she's having a blast with this role. But I mean, come on, it's Angelica Houston from The Witches. We also get Chris Rock, but only in voiceover form. However, he does a great job in that role as well. Overall, everybody's performance here was actually really good, but unfortunately, they were just in a movie that went on a bit too long. Now, from a technical perspective, this movie's very hit or miss. As far as how it's shot and its sets and all of that, it all looks great. This is a good looking movie with some really nice locations. However, there is a decent amount of CGI in this movie, and while it's not terrible, it really stands out. This is not the best looking CGI I've ever seen, and really for a Robert Zemeckis movie, I kind of expected a little bit better. The guy's always kind of been on the forefront of special effects in his films, but not here. I don't know if it's because like partway through production, they found out they were going straight to streaming and not to theaters, so maybe they said, well, we're not gonna put quite as much money into those effects now, or if it was something else, but I do feel like something happened here. This is not the norm for a Robert Zemeckis movie. Say what you will about the guy's movies, but he typically has some really good cutting-edge special effects in them. And the special effects that are in this movie, while there are quite a few of them, it's not like any of them would be like super hard to do. I mean, maybe they'd be hard for me to do, but I mean, for special effects houses, we've seen these types of effects much better many times. So like I said, I don't know what happened here, but it really stands out, especially with the CGI living characters, like the mice, and there's a cat and some snakes and things like that. These things are the ones that really stand out and just don't look that great. Now, it doesn't like ruin the movie or anything. I've seen much worse special effects, but how everything else in the movie looks so damn good and is such a high quality, it really just makes these CGI effects stick out that much more. So I guess with such great set design and cinematography, couple that with the not so great CGI, and you come out somewhere kind of in the middle, and I'll just say overall, technically, the movie was solid. At the end of the day, guys, The Witches was okay. This is not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even the worst remake I've ever seen, but it's also not the greatest. That would be the thing. I mean, it's got its pluses, and overall, there is some enjoyment to be had here, but especially coming from a fan of the original movie, I was a bit let down. It has some really good performances, and it is a really good story, though its execution does lack a bit, and while the movie does look nice, the CGI does kind of drag it down. So overall, for fans and non-fans alike, if you're really interested in seeing this one, at best, check it out on streaming.
Across the street.
While I was a bit disappointed in this movie, it was okay. And I don't think it's worth going out and getting an HBO Max subscription just for this movie, but if you do already have one, it's worth checking out one night if you're looking for something to watch. So there it is, guys, my review of The Witches. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Gulf Shores.
Witches. They're real. And they hate children.
If you did at least somewhat like this movie and you haven't seen the original, definitely check that one out. Even if you didn't like this movie, definitely check out the original movie. It's really good for pretty much everybody, kids and adults alike. However, there are some parts in the original Witches that are pretty fucking terrifying. Like the part where the witches unmask themselves for the first time. Holy shit! That shit gave me fucking nightmares for years.